Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of TBR. I'm George Binns, and this evening we're going to talk about veterans services. And to help us understand it better, I have with us Dave Perinchief, the Director of the Services for Beverly, and Steve Bohn for Eastern Essex County. So, I'm a veteran, and I come to see you. What can you do for me?
All right, so the first thing is understanding the state's definition and the VA's definition of a veteran. One of the big issues that we run into regularly is we'll have National Guardsmen who may have served for a single term. They went to boot camp, they did their basic training, but they were never activated under what's known as Title X. If you join as a guardsman or reservist and you're never activated, you technically, by the state's regulations and the VA's rules, you don't qualify under the veteran status. So that's been a big one that always comes up, and the guys don't understand that the activation is required.
Yeah.
So that would be the first one. Other than that, anybody who served active duty for at least 90 consecutive days would usually end up qualifying for veteran services if they went in as a active duty, not reserve or guard.
Yeah.
So that's one of the biggest issues that we face. Is it kind of feels bad when you have to turn them away, but we can't take care of everybody who signs the contract. It's very a needs-based program.
Yeah. Well, there's also, I think, in the state of Massachusetts, a variation between veterans and non-veterans. It's almost like the VFW's requirements. You have to have been in a combat situation or during a dust-up.
Yes, and a little bit of no. So the federal side, the VA has what's known as eligibility for medical only,
Yep.
where if a veteran, say he doesn't complete basic training, he gets injured at basic training.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was injured during that basic training time, he's still eligible for VA care because the injury was due to the result of
Basic training.
Yeah. Versus the Chapter 115 program where you have to have that veteran status for the state benefit program. And the rules are pretty cut and dry. It's on the state website of what the criteria and eligibility are. The amount of days they have to be in during wartime or the amount of days they have to be in during peacetime.
Mm-hmm.
So with that is the route that we utilize when we are establishing the benefits to begin with. Now, due to paperwork errors, clericals before computers and tech became standard and matching, verification matching became standard, we do run into a few hiccups. There'll be a veteran who may have served Guard and Reserve time, who then was activated, but the Title X orders never made it into their service record. And then we have to go through the process of tracking it down, developing information. We have one gentleman from Beverly who was a Guard and Reserve, was activated, ended up going overseas for 90 days, but his record never made it home.
Mm-hmm.
But he had pictures of himself overseas with the unit and a picture at the command station for the unit. We were able to backtrack that information to the unit's diary to verify he was actually over there and get a correction of records.
Yeah. So, do you have a similar kind of problems with the Essex County, or is there anything different about the way you operate?
I mean, we pretty much operate in the same standards for Chapter 115 and VA claims. But right now, like my big thing is
When you say Chapter 115, is that a state
benefit?
State benefit.
Roger. So I mean, when I say Massachusetts is the most vet-friendly state in the country, I honestly believe that. And you can look at the record of Massachusetts' track record taking care of their veterans. Chapter 115 is not in every state. This is only Massachusetts state for low-income veterans and their family. But I always tell the older generation coming back, I hate to say it, they're a little stubborn, trying to go through the VA. So it's only hurting their families in the long run now is when they need care, but then they're not yet enrolled in VA. They don't have a service connection disability. So when these needs come, when the veteran can't take care of himself and they need help paying for, nursing home care, that's where aid and attendance can come in. That's a federal, through the VA, it's a benefit for the families to be able to pay for nursing home care. But there's a bunch of eligibility requirements for that as well. But I always tell the veteran, especially having your records, keep copies of your records,
Oh, yeah.
because I'm having, veterans pass away and their families are coming to me saying, I have a veteran, my husband or my father was a veteran, but he doesn't have, a discharge record. So trying to get that emergency request for a records request to get that military funeral is very important. So, like I said, the older generation, they, it's trying to reach them and trying to make sure that they have everything lined up for when, that time comes and they pass, that their families aren't struggling, trying to run around chasing paperwork. So
Yeah.
that's really what,
So basically, you're talking about the DD-214.
Roger.
Yeah.
Simple records
Never lose
requests.
that thing, yeah.
Oh, no. I always tell people I have like 20 copies in your house. Give them to your wife, give them to your family.
Yeah.
And to support the aid and attendance, this was something I brought up with the city council meetings, especially for our Vietnam era veterans who are now, like the first generation Vietnam veterans who were over their early 60s,
Yeah.
boots on the ground, and then some of the guys who were there actually when the French were still handling things when they were over as contractors. It takes a toll when you get sick in the later ages, and it usually comes fast and furious. And without the ability for us to put things together accurately, it's a lot harder for the VA to step in and the federal side to step in. So, especially filing disability claims. The PACT Act that came out recently that the government passed included more conditions on the Agent Orange exposure lists. They've included more locations on the list. They've included the blue water ships, the Navy.
Basically, what is the PACT Act?
So the PACT Act, actually, do you want to take this because you were more...
So PACT
Yeah.
Act is a new comprehensive plan through the government funded. So it opens a whole eligibility up to veterans that were overseas exposed to toxic exposures. So the presumptive conditions have changed and have opened up. So hypertension right now is on that presumptive condition list. So trying to get everything documented and all of the new presumptive conditions that came out, it's just opened up a whole wide of eligible
So
veterans.
basically, it starts with they were burning some nasty stuff in lots of different places,
Yeah.
and the troops were exposed to it.
Yep. So for the Vietnam vets, it would be the chemical...
Agent Orange.
Agent
Yep.
Orange chemical exposure.
Yeah.
Well, so what they did with the first part of it is that they've increased the amount of eligibility locations. So Navy ships that were in the blue water zones that were previously not permitted are now being permitted.
Even if they weren't boots on ground in Vietnam, they were still in the
They
area.
were close enough to get exposed to
Roger.
the Agent Orange.
Yeah, so-
Blew out to sea.
Roger.
Well, as the water runoff would come through down the deltas,
Yeah.
the blue water ships would suck up water for the desalination plants. But
Yeah.
that was designed to remove salt, not chemical agents.
Oh, okay.
So these guys are basically drinking or being exposed to it either through the on ship, through the containers, through transportation. So there's this huge group of veterans from the Navy who were exposed, who may have passed away to conditions on the presumptive list, but the wives don't know because there's no one there to talk to them. So my biggest thing is, as Steve has alluded, the vets are stubborn. We are a stubborn breed. It's just
Yeah.
the way we are.
Yeah.
I'm not going to deny it. But the wives can get them in. And I've appealed to the spouses. If your husband served and he doesn't want to come in, you come in. Because we will tell you exactly what we can
Yeah.
start doing. And I get a lot more vets once the wives start dragging them in. But it's extremely important because there's not only medical benefits, as I tell everyone, don't chase the financial benefit of the VA. Chase the medical. Because once you get the medical, the financial follows.
Yeah.
There's this nuance that veterans have, like, oh, well, the government, is going to pay me money. No, the government's going to provide you health care, which will then come with a financial compensation for what you went through for them.
Yeah.
For proven service connections.
Yeah.
Through your military service.
And then also on the Chapter 115 side, you may have veterans who, again, Vietnam, especially Steve and my generation, I was, I joined in June of '01. September 11th happened, and it was just full tilt from there. So now we're coming to the end. So I'm first generation in, one of the first generations out of that war. I'm in
Yeah.
my 40s.
Yeah.
10 years ago when I got out, all these conditions weren't even considered.
Yeah.
But like the sinusitis, nasal issues, breathing issues. I mean, I have videos of us walking through sandstorms.
Yeah.
So I'm documenting everything now because in 10 years, they could pop up and say, hey, you have this awkward growth in your lungs, service connection, because we've started developing evidence now. Think of the VA like a law firm. They will give you what you're entitled to, but you have to prove it.
Yeah.
You have to have that evidence. But then also comes the economic side of it. You know, we've had a recession, we've had the housing market collapse. It's been very difficult for veterans who maybe came in the 2010, between the 2010 2020 window because of everything that's going on. So we have to start looking forward, you know, what's their financial future looking at? Is inflation going to affect their long-term savings, their overall income, their Social Security? That's where Chapter 115 steps in as that fallback. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, you've done everything right. You got dealt a bad hand, but you're
Yeah.
working, you're trying this, your income's still not there. Now here comes the Chapter 115 program to help keep your head above water. But then the spouses, you want to go into about the spouses as how they're eligible after the fact? Yeah. Okay. All right, so
You're on a roll. Go ahead.
sorry. So the spouses are also. This is another big one. If the veteran is eligible for Chapter 115 with the spouse included, when the veteran passes away, the spouse can still utilize this benefit, and it covers everything. So think about it this way: if you're a single, if you're a widow, and let's say your overall income is less than $3,000 a month, and you have less than $6,500 in assets, and we're talking cash money, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, Roth IRAs, 401ks.
Yeah.
You've done everything right, but inflation, property taxes, your money's
It's gone. Yeah.
Yep.
You spent it.
Yeah, this program steps in, and it's not a here's money. It's a we're gonna stop the bleeding. We can't pull you out of the hole, but we can prevent you from losing the quality of life that you work so hard for. We can keep you in your home. We can work with the state. We can adjust. You know, we can see about what we can do about your property taxes. There's all these. This program is to keep the veterans' families' head above water.
Yeah.
The best thing about Chapter 115, so if you own a home and you pay for fuel, you know, they offer, Chapter 115 also covers fuel assistance. You got to save those receipts, obviously, to prove.
Yeah.
They also cover out-of-pocket medical costs, prescription costs. So you bring in those receipts to us. Usually CVS is really great with our offices. They'll send us a list of, you know, all of things. But yeah, simple things like that. Medicare Part D, you know, everything is on a needs-based income.
Yeah.
But if they're under, I think it's like 2,400 if you're single, 42, 44 if you have a couple. The assets is $8,000 for a single and $16,000 for a couple.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's not meant to be a forever thing. We want to try to help them find, you know, sustainable employment,
Yeah.
especially the younger generation. That's why we also team up with Mass Hire. It's a great state, you know, organization, and they have them in Haverhill, Lawrence, Salem, and they have a military liaison that works for them that
What
can
does
help.
Mass Hire do for you?
So they help with employment training, so unemployment benefits as well. But their mission is to do resume building, job coaching, job fairs, getting you out there. And that's why they have a military veteran liaison in every office that focuses on just veterans coming home. I remember when I first came home, the unemployment rate for global war and terrorism vets was like 7%, I think, and now obviously it's gone down to, I think it's like 3% now. But just trying to focus on, you know, when vets come home, they feel like they've lost purpose. I know that was for me.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, now what? I was injured by a suicide bomber in '08, spent 7 months at Walter Reed. I knew my career was over. That worry, that panic of, all right, what's the next chapter in my life
Yeah.
going to hold for me or tell? So just having that training assistance, resume building, how to transfer your military skills onto a civilian, resume to try to put yourself out there. But I think that's when other vets can come in and step up in the community as well, and help guide the next people coming home to be like, hey, listen, I know the confusion, I know the paperwork that's involved, but this is what you need to do.
Been there, done that, and this is how you get out of it. Yeah.
And that's really where the city's veteran program
Well,
is really.
that's really
put.
your job, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah.
That,
We never stopped being. I never stopped being a staff sergeant. That's all I'm going to say. It really was. When I first started working for the city, they did an article. I have a very firm hand when it comes to dealing with my generation of veterans because the world is a lot tougher. Competition is a lot harder. Now we're faced with growing AI, a large amount of college graduates because so many kids went to college versus trades. So if you're a vet getting out, you really got to get your head down and move. You can't hold still for too long because you'll get left behind.
well, one of the things that bothers me about it, you talk about the veterans having this 7% unemployment rate. It's sort of inherent. And you look at, okay, now it's down to 3%. But what's the quality of those jobs that make up the difference? Is that something that a veteran can develop a family on?
So what I tell everybody, the first thing, so when I got out as a staff NCO, I was, there's nine enlisted ranks in the military. I was at number 6, so I was 3 from the top.
Yeah.
And I picked up my rank exceedingly quickly from my field, which was infantry. When I got out, I went and started working at GameStop. I went from leading troops, being a platoon sergeant, handling huge amounts of equipment, and I went to packing video games on the shelf. I think back then, this is like 2010, so I think it was like $8 an hour.
Yeah,
But I had a job,
yeah,
which then when I went to speak to other people, it wasn't, oh, you've been unemployed for 6 months. It's like you're currently working, you did the military, you immediately transitioned and started working again. Come see us, which led to a better job.
yeah.
And then which led to another job, which then led to here. So there was this buildup. This is the hard part when you go from a high level of responsibility to having to hit that reset button.
Yeah.
A lot of vets, that's a real kick in the teeth. But you have to accept the fact that this is,
Well, it's a different ball game, and you got to play
you got to play ball. You got
different
to.
rules. And
There's some qualifications and jobs that you have in the military don't necessarily qualify you in the civilian sector.
Well,
So that's where a lot of, you might be able to be a high qualified, nurse, but you don't have the actual certification when you get out of the civilian sector
Yeah.
to get that job.
And I know that Congress, I think, we're talking, I think during Obama's era, Congress had started to pass regulations that if the military standards need to match the civilian sector. We had a corpsman who was phenomenal. I still remember we were driving down a road under fire. This guy's putting in an IV, stopping bleeding, handling that. Meanwhile, we're bumping down a road in back of a truck. But when he got back stateside, they're like, well, we don't know if you're qualified to be a EMT.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
what?
are you, like, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's gotten better.
Yeah.
But obviously there's still work to be done, especially with important matters like that.
Well, I think part of the problem is convincing the vet that says, you don't take that stuff. You got real experience. And like you were saying, you were organizing a mob to do something useful. And maybe you should have gone into one of the big box stores and taken over one of those things,
Yeah.
kind of thing. But where do you get that kind of advice and counsel?
So that's where we come in. So the VSOs within regions all talk to each other. They all communicate.
Yeah.
There's a lot of experience within every field of in every town, and the understanding just getting there's a baseline thing that we got to do. You get out. I always tell the guys, if you can work and do school, get your school done. Endicott's been great up here. They have the Van Loan School, which is for veterans who are a little bit older. So I'm not sitting next to an 18-year-old kid, and I'm just like, but you're with other adult learners who are working full time. So their curriculum is based around full time adult learners.
Yeah.
But with that, I utilize the VA work study. So I have veteran students who they go down to City Hall, they do their CORI check, and then they can come to my office. They help with paperwork, filing, event planning, pulling flags, doing things around the city, but they're getting their housing allowance from the VA, their school is paid for, and then they get a $5,000, almost a $5,000 a semester kicker for working in the office. City doesn't have to pay for that, and we get some extra help in the services. And that's open to anything that is veteran related. So they can do it in Beverly, Salem, Steve's office. They can do it anywhere if it's a veteran related facility. But it's that building their credentials. So not only are they then with us learning the ropes, learning how the information works, because they're sharing that information out with their counterparts, even if they're older generation or younger generation. That information is getting shared because the vets all talk to each other. So then you'll get older guys coming in and like, I still have my GI Bill. I believe recently they've turned it into the Forever GI Bill. So
There's the post 9/11 Montgomery first, post 9/11 GI Bill, and now the Forever GI Bill,
Yeah.
which doesn't expire.
Yeah.
So like when I was in, it was the post 9/11. So I had to use it within a certain window. I think
15 years.
Yeah, so my window was coming up, so I went to Endicott and got a bachelor's in business science, business management.
Okay.
It was like, it's a wide swath degree that can pretty much be put into any field, really.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing is explaining to the veterans, like when you look at your field of study, you have to look at what's going to give me the largest net for getting future
What are
employment.
you going to be able to do with it? That's really what it comes down to. And
Yeah.
I think there's too many art history majors in this world, that similar kinds of things. And somebody's got to steer them away from that stuff. It's an easy course, it's fun and all that kind of thing.
I just
What are
want
you
to
gonna
go
do?
back a little on the Chapter 115.
Yeah.
So the state actually pays for 75%, and the city and town pays for 25%. So the state reimburses the city or town 75% of each Chapter 115 applicant's check, which is, I think, is really remarkable.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, it drives communities to want to do more because
Well, it
they're only
keeps the
paying.
community involved because they're paying for it.
Well, 25%, yeah.
Yeah.
And,
But it's also how well we manage it.
Yeah.
So the reason that we exist is it's not our money, which is sometimes a mindset of some VSOs, but it is our responsibility to
Yeah.
ensure that that money is not being squandered or wasted, because there is a point where within the regulations, we're allowed to make a judgment call on a veteran. So, perfect example, I had a veteran come in, he lost his license, he had fallen behind in a payment. His license was taken away. Because of that, he is at risk of losing his job. Now, the repayment to the state was $600. So, okay, if we spend the $600, we're not going to get reimbursed because the state won't do that, but by spending $600 of the city's money to pay off his license to keep him working, kept him off of Chapter 115, which ended up saving the city money in the long run.
Yeah.
So we have a level of control to look at the bigger picture. So by him not having to come on 115, which would then have cost the city $1,500 a month, and he could have been on that program for 2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
$600 ends up saving us $40,000.
Yeah.
So you got to really make that judgment call and look what's going to be better for this veteran in the long run.
Well, you're balancing the veteran and the city too.
Yeah.
Because if you squander the money on like a 115 payment, all of a sudden some guy comes in with a real problem.
Yeah.
Sorry, buddy, we're out of money. We already spent it all.
Well, it also comes to, having a job, right? It's giving you purpose. It's keeping you busy. When veterans come home and say they're getting, just a check from the VA, they're not working. They're, drinking more. They're getting more into substance abuse, and that really creates, a really big mental health, which is a big thing right now, especially, post-traumatic stress coming home. But having that community, having that veteran community in each city or town, to be able to be that lending hand, and be like, hey, I've been there, I've gone, I know the hurdles coming home, I know what's gonna benefit you in the long run, what benefit. There's just so many benefits out there that it really confuses veterans coming home. But that's where we come in, and we explain these benefits and the different eligibility requirements.
Yeah, so I know with our time, the big thing is, if you're a veteran and you feel you qualify and you're low income or you're struggling financially, call our office. We'll assess it. We'll see what we can do.
Well,
if you've never filed a VA claim, and I stress this to every veteran and their spouses, if something happened to your husband, if he served in an area where there's chemical, get him in our office.
Well, it ought to be automatic when you get out of the service and you find out where you're going. Find the.
But Massachusetts is very special that that state law requires us to be here. If you go, I had a friend in California. He was sleeping in the bridge. There was no VSO for 500 miles. Nobody who could help him.
Yeah.
So
Well, Massachusetts has got it. Veterans should immediately just go to your office. What's available? What am I entitled to?
It's a
What
lot of
can I do?
outreach, and that's what's very important is that keep that outreach. You want to be a part of these vets. You want to get them out of their house. You want them to start getting that camaraderie back that they felt, in the military.
I notice that every time I click on My Healthy Vet up in the right-hand corner, do you want to talk to a counselor? I mean, it's a serious concern.
It is. No, it
and
is.
the veteran posts are also a major component of this. The big thing about the younger generation needs to learn is that the veteran posts, all the benefits, all the programs, everything that we have now is because of those older generations fighting on Capitol Hill, fighting in Congress. So the posts are struggling right now because the younger generation isn't becoming members. But what the younger guys need to learn is that membership gives you a voice to help fight for legislation, because now you have a representation when the VFW, the American Legion, the DAV, the AMVETS, when they're up there speaking in front of Congress, they have numbers to back their argument.
Yeah.
And so that's another one where the posts, and a lot of the posts are changing. I know a lot of them are starting to adapt. Again, change is hard. It is what it is. But that adapting to the new way of doing things, the outreach, the Facebook, the social media, the change is coming.
Yeah.
It's our generation's obligation to keep the VFWs running, the American Legions, but that it's really hard, like he said, getting those younger vets out there to step up and try to keep it going. But
Well, it's been an interesting half hour. We thank you very much for your advice. And
so much to talk about, so
Oh, God, we could go on. We could do
Yeah.
an entire segment just on aid and attendance.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us this evening, and we'll probably have another discussion with these gentlemen. There's a lot more to cover, and I think it'd be interesting. And so stay tuned.